brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
We will call the meeting to order. Welcome to the November 2nd, 2020 meeting of the Eau Claire Plan Commission. This meeting is being broadcast live by Valley Media Works on Charter Channel 994, WRFP-LP 101.9 FM, and online at valleymediaworks.org. The Plan Commission attempts to conduct its public hearings in a relatively informal manner, within the constraint that we must deal with the issues before us in a orderly and business-like fashion. We give the applicant an opportunity to speak first on public hearing items, and then others, either for or against the proposal, are each permitted to speak once. We do request that everyone restrict their comments to the issues before us, avoid unnecessary repetition, and be prudent in the use of time. We want to make sure that we have adequate time to review and discuss all items with equal diligence. And for those of you participating from home, welcome. We ask that you are in an area that is free of background distractions while you speak. With that, we'll start with the roll call. Mr. Christopherson.
Here.
Seymour. Here. Renhold.
Here.
Granlund.
Here.
Greger.
Here.
Rosnick. Mr. Rosnick.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Wolfram.
Here.
And Commissioner O'Bay.
Here.
And Chair is present. Any changes or mistakes in the minutes from October 19th? Right. That, without objection, the minutes are approved. Next is the open public comment period for items that do not appear on this agenda, noted as public hearings or public discussion. And I will check with folks who have called in. First, you appear to me as caller user number 3, but if you are calling in by landline, I thought that was caller user number 2. No? Caller. If you're calling in with a landline comment period, Christina Brunn, are you? All right, we have a message from one of our persons. Not able to connect. Okay. Josh Weinke, are you here for public comment? And I don't get the unmute button. I'm sorry, we have some technical difficulties here. It won't allow me to unmute. connected with me. agreements. Control. Well, I think Ms. Mobley, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm here for an agenda item.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. All right. Christina Thrun, are you here for open public comment?
No, I don't have anything for open public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I checked with anyone that I can here. So we'll move on to item number 5, which is a public hearing for recommendation to City Council to recommend approval to rezone property from PR1A to R3P and to adopt the general development plan for multi-family apartments up to 36 units. Mr. Petrie.
Good evening, thank you, Chairperson Larson. On your screen is agenda item number 5, located south of North Crossing Highway 312, east of Jeffers Road. Here's the notification map showing the properties that were notified. 300-foot buffer. There is also a sign on the property. This is just south of the Home Builders Association. West or east of the Holiday gas station, and then to the west on this map is the large senior apartment. Also on the northeast corner of this map was a unit that was rezoned to R3P back in 2018, and they completed that project in 2019. That is a 30-unit apartment complex. That's shown on this map. This map is from 2018. The applicant is requesting to rezone to R3P and to adopt a general development plan for up to 36 unit apartment. The property is located at 4223 Jeffers Road. The applicant we met with pre-development meeting. This was one of the proposals that was submitted. As you noted, the applicant did revise his plan after meeting with staff, and now he's proposing up to potentially only 2 buildings rather than what was submitted with 3 buildings. The staff report would allow for flexibility. Granted, this is a general development plan, so in the end, the Plan Commission and the City Council will review this. The applicant will get with his team, engineer, and architect to come up with a final conclusion. But the maximum density allowed would be up to 3 buildings and up to that 36 units. This property has been marketed for sale for many years, and the applicant does have the property under contract at this time. Attached to your packet is the preliminary site plan, building elevation, and narrative provided by the applicant. The comprehensive plan designates this area as medium to high density residential. The parcel is approximately 2.1 acres. Under the R3 zoning classification, you are allowed up to 21 units per acre. Obviously, the 36 units is a little less than 42 plus or minus units. The general development plan does show, as mentioned, first we proposed three buildings. Building 1 did have a garage attached. Building 2 and 3 were surface parking. After meeting with the applicant and discussing it with him, the applicant did provide this general plan as well, which would be 2 buildings. Both buildings would have garage parking. The units would be facing to the north, and there would be parking to the south. A little more open space. There would be a retention pond to the south of this property, and then you would have units facing to the north. The That is a private driveway, if you remember a couple years ago. That would be shared by these three properties, as shown on the screen here. He's proposing one driveway off of that common driveway. The original plan that was in your packet, that was the first plan. He did have a driveway shown on Jefferson Road. With this master plan of that area, they were only allowed one driveway total for these three parcels on the Jefferson Road. So then he came up this site plan, and then finally this revised site plan. So in the end, a final site plan will need to come back to this commission for at a later date, as this is just a general development plan. It will have to have full engineering plans, architectural plans, landscape plans, and parking plans. Staff did note that there would be required a 10-foot buffer to the south. As shown on the aerial, that is a single-family property, currently zoned R1A. We believe, the staff believes in the future that will probably be redeveloped into a little larger density. It would have to be rezoned through this commission and through the council, and then also a final site plan. As you probably know, this area has seen multi-family development along with split home development and single-family development. Most of that has been north of the North Crossing. And this is one of the only parcels remaining in this area that would be buildable. To the south, there is some parcels, but that is mostly for the transmission line for the XR Energy power line corridor. The grading and drainage is noted in your report, along with the public utilities. The water and sewer is available along Jefferson Road and along also the private driveway. Traffic and transit is noted in the report. There is a few conditions that need to be met after this approval, or with this approval this evening, and then next week at council. Final site plan as mentioned. General development plan, he did reduce it down to 2 buildings, as noted, and the driveway needs to be only 24 feet wide. On the other site plan, it was at 32 feet wide. We also need, the applicant would need to provide detailed drawings of engineering plans, grading and drainage to the engineering department. With that, I'd be standing for any questions this evening.
Thank you. Any questions for the commission for Mr. Petrie? Mr. Gregory.
Thank you, Chair Larson. Thank you, Mr. Petrie. So the drawing we have in front of us right now is essentially the general development plan as presented. Is that, because obviously we see some other drawings in our packet. Are those to be essentially discarded at this point, and then this is ultimately what we have in front of us for consideration?
Yes, excellent question, Commissioner Gregory. So we met with the applicant pre-development meeting back in October. This was submitted to staff. I believe it was on Tuesday evening last week. Our report was modified, and this is the plan that the developer is comfortable with, along with staff. As you know, with the previous submittal, which we wanted to provide into the packet, doesn't have much open space. The layout doesn't seem that appropriate. And then when we met with the applicant and he discussed it with his team, staff felt that this proposal provides more green space, provides all garage parking for the tenants, and then also provides a larger buffer to the south, with the understanding that a retention pond probably would be shown on the screen where it is. So that he just wanted to provide that all to the planning commission and to the public for public record.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the commission for Mr. Petrie? Seeing none, thank you. And Mr. Lorenzo apparently doesn't have audio. Ms. Brown, are you here for, this particular item?
Yeah, I'm with the Chippewa Valley Home Builders Association, so I was curious to see what the plan would look like. I don't really have any questions, but happy to answer anything about related to our property. But I'm here more for curiosity.
All right, thank you. I see Mr. Ramsey has his hand up, but I do not know allowed to unmute it for some reason. I don't think it's panelist. All right. I'm walking through the Eddie and I can't get on. Mr. Renza, can you hear me? Let's see. Here we go. Mr. Renza, can you hear me now? All right, I am unmuted. Mr. Renza, can you hear me? Try this again. Can you hear us now, Mr. Renza? Yes, video too, I can see him. Sorry, yeah. I have you unmuted, I don't understand why I can't hear you. Asking if you want me to call in, I suppose. Yeah. Yes, please. I haven't run into this before. And for some reason it's showing. I logged in as an attendee as well. And there's no audio option. Simply the audio broadcast. And now here it is. I just moved to the panelists. Right, so that's the only opportunity to connect the audio. But Mr. Renza is still available. Is this Mr. Renza? Calling Eastern Revive. That's what I just checked with. Calling Eastern Revive. Is this Mr.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can. I apologize for the difficulties here.
No, that's fine. I could hear you guys talking, so we could just start with the questions. I heard everything.
All right, did you have anything to add to what Mr. Petrie said?
I might have missed that, but I listened to his whole rundown of the property and what I'm proposing in the first site plan and how we revised it to the second site plan.
Okay. Do you have any questions from the commission for Mr. Renzo? Mr. O'Gay.
Thank you, Chairperson Larson and Mr. Harumza, for your time. I'm just wondering if a conversation has been had with the owner of the single-family residence to the south of this planned development.
It has not been.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wolfcraft.
Thank you, Chairperson Larson, and good evening, Mr. Harumza. I want to start out by saying that I want to support your general development plan and request for rezoning. In your brief narrative, you state that there is a large demand for housing, but then you stop there. What I need to hear is your plan for affordability within the context of understanding the needs of those employees in the area. In our comprehensive plan, the housing chapter goal and objective number 1 focuses on promoting affordability across Eau Claire and to use regulations to make housing affordable for all. Since the fall of 2018, housing access and affordability rose to a top city priority along with affordability recommendations of the Chippewa Valley Housing Task Force. When an ask is made of the city most commonly rezoning, how will you help workers in this area access affordable housing? Large employers in this area, such as Hutchison Technologies, pay their hourly workers anywhere from $14 an hour, which is approximately $27,000 a year, to more senior technicians making $35 an hour, with an average of about $23 an hour or $44,000 a year. Nestle's pays their production operators on average $25 an hour or approximately $48,000 a year. Our county median income hovers close to $60,000 a year. Again, I want to support your development, but would like to hear how you will contribute to meet the needs of our workers in this area. If your plan is market rate housing, then I would ask that you consider mixing in a small number of units of workforce and attainable housing at 60 to 80% of the county median income. Increased density does not on its own lead to affordability. We have seen other market rate developers come before us understanding that every few units of affordable housing in every neighborhood and district assists our community mixing those in. We can only grow our local economy and build a healthy community if we are intentional about integrating affordable housing in every neighborhood and district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renzo.
Yeah, I did hear that. I have a bad connection now, but yeah, I mean, my 1 and 2 bedrooms on this whole project fit the complete definition of workforce housing. You know, falling within the 80% of the CMI of Eau Claire for sure. You guys still connected here?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I was just picking up a ton of static. I couldn't even hear myself talk there. Yeah, so I think, I don't remember what the 2-bedroom exactly, but I think the 2-bedroom puts you outside of workforce housing at like $1,400 or $1,500 on the 2 bedrooms. I'm going to be at $1,250, and that includes cable television and internet. These properties will, all of them, the 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms will all include everything except electricity, which will also be heat. But these properties include everything, so it's an all-inclusive price. So you have to back some of that out of there to come up with the true numbers. The one bedrooms are going to be anywhere from 900 to 950. Giving them the option to even go lower than that if they don't take one of the garage stall parkings. So as far as getting to your question about workforce housing, it definitely falls within those.
Can I just say that I appreciate that feedback and that does fall within the workforce housing range. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission for Mr. Lorenzo? Mr. Greger.
Thank you, Chair Larson. Mr. Rivera, thank you. I guess my question was about the parking piece of it. I'm not sure if I counted correctly, but there was at least roughly 22 garage stalls and 39 surface parking stalls. Could you maybe explain, how, like, if the number of parking spaces is matching the number of required spaces, or if it's more than that or less than that?
Yeah, it for sure does. My architect's the same architect that's worked in this city for many years, so he knows the requirements for the city of Eau Claire. So he put in the correct amount of parking, which I believe is 1 per bedroom for you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for the commission?
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Mary. This isn't so much, I guess, maybe just for the developer, but just in the area alone, because I know we manage a property over there as well. The traffic is getting really congested. My concern is the stoplights there. There's no turn signal. Do you know if there's any traffic studies being done or anything that's going to be done to address that heavier traffic on Jeffers getting on North Crossing?
That would be a DOT question, correct? On that intersection?
Better directed for the city or staff.
Excuse me, let's check.
Yeah, this is Trevor with City Engineering. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I can.
Okay. I do know that in the year 2022, I believe the DOT is doing some work at that intersection. They're doing some meetings right now that some city staff have participated in. But the timeline for construction on those improvements is going to be 2022. And I do think that does include changing some of the turn lane layout over there. With some of they have had high accident rates up in that intersection. So as far as we know, those improvements will be coming.
Okay, thank you for updating on that. I live in that area as well, and I know it's just horrible getting onto North Crossing, especially in the morning. So thinking of more traffic coming, getting onto North Crossing is just going to make it worse. But thank you for answering that, Trevor. And I just want to speak to the project itself. I'm aware of some of this developers' projects, and he does a great job building, and his prices, I know workforce housing and affordable housing is always a really big issue for the city of Eau Claire, and it's certainly been a hot topic of discussion. And I always have found his rates to be really comparable for those 80% rates. So I just think the project looks awesome, and the design concept is really good. So I'm really excited, hopefully, to see this come to light. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any more questions for the commission? All right, thank you, Mr. Renzo.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see if there's a motion for item number 5.
Motion to approve the rezone request.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having some trouble today. All right. Apologize for that. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who came
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear Mr. Haremza describe the rent affordability of his units. I would like to encourage developers more and more to include that in their packet of materials when they're coming before Plan Commission. But it certainly does seem that this development meets objective one of housing affordability in the comprehensive plan. And the new multifamily design plan, the changes that Plan Commission and City Council made in earlier this year, one of the guiding principles is to emphasize on design ensuring that affordability and sustainability will be integrated into new projects. So I think it's important that we address both affordability and sustainability. Those two things go hand in hand. So I am willing to support this development and glad to see it coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, this mostly could your name and address, please. For the record? Oh. I know we've heard from this mostly before, but yeah. Ms. Mosley, can you just give us your name and address, please?
Oh, sure. Judy Mosley, 2230 Trimble Street, Eau Claire.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, I will check with call-in user number 5. If you are calling in by landline and have something to say about the rezone at Jeffers Road, can you identify yourself? Right. Okay, now we will check to see if there's a motion on the commission for approval of rezoning under item number 5.
This is Mary. I would like to make a motion to approve the rezone request.
Thank you. Mr. Wolfram?
I will second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Gregor?
Thank you, Chair Larson. I really want to thank staff for working with the applicant on the two building concept and just kind of reorienting those buildings. I think this is a really good design, and obviously there are challenges that come along with having a private drive like this, and the city generally tries to avoid having multiple property owners off of a private drive because sometimes there's not good connectivity, and it can be kind of difficult to navigate for the public. But I think the way that this project lays on the land and, provides a sidewalk, essentially along the private drive, at least most of it, is a really good choice. So as long as the applicant sticks to this concept in general when we see the site plan, I think it's a really good use of the space. I know that this land has been difficult to sell, and I seem to recall the owner of the land being somewhat upset about the high value of the land because of the taxes they were paying off of it. But now we see why the land was considered so valuable, is that it can really attract quite a development like this. And another thing that I appreciate about this is there's the senior housing cooperative to the southeast. That it looks to be plenty of buffer, and the trees that really kind of line the border of this whole property kind of help be a good neighbor, I guess you could say. So, just wanted to speak in support of this and thank the applicant and staff for working together to make this project even better. Thanks.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we will call the roll. Mr. Christopherson? Aye. Seymour? Aye. Brenthold?
Aye.
Granlund?
Aye.
Gregor?
Aye.
Rosick?
Aye.
Wolfram,
Aye.
Obey,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. That item passes. Congratulations. Item number 6 is a public hearing for recommendation to City Council for a change in zoning that would allow for light manufacturing and production within a C3 zone district. Yeah, in the city of Eau Claire. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should note as well as this is a zoning text amendment, more of a technicality that the city is coming forward with this, but it is on behalf of a specific applicant we've had some conversations with throughout the year. The applicant is on the line, Mr. Steve Dye, in regards to his consolidation of some of his business operations. So we'll get to that a little bit here shortly. Before I jump into the actual text, I do want to give a little background of how we've come to this point this evening. Included in your packet was the actual text amendment looking to essentially take the light manufacturing production definition, use type definition from the industrial zoning classification and putting it into the commercial zoning classification, and specifically as a conditional use only within the C3 or community commercial zoning classification. You may recall back on March 16th, as we began our time with this pandemic, staff noted that craft manufacturing, micro manufacturing, makers districts, and the like could be considered as a potential new use type in certain commercial zoning districts. Should note that even at that time, simply allowing the current use type of light manufacturing production may likely be too permissive, even with the few subtle redactions that the applicant has recommended. Allowing more traditionally industrial type uses to be allowed in buildings and areas built for commercial purposes, again, maybe a bit broad and permissive, and that's how staff has presented this for you here this evening. But again, at that time back in March, and we included the staff memo and the materials from the applicant as a part of your package. Within that, there are several different other use type definitions that were under consideration and for discussion as well. I'll kind of jump ahead here a little bit. And before I do so, though, in terms of that kind of broad and permissiveness of the current definition, as I talk a little bit more about kind of a more micro manufacturing concept, I highlighted here some of the terminology within the current definition that's before you here this evening that may be, again, a bit too permissive or perhaps not in line with what the Plan Commission or staff is looking to move forward with in this commercial zoning district. Again, noted here too that generally the reference is generally emphasized for wholesale, not really inclusive of the retail component in a significant fashion. Again, we look at a micro manufacturing concept or artisan manufacturing or that maker's district idea. The idea is to have more of a front-loaded retail component with kind of back-of-house manufacturing concept rather than essentially the other way around. Goods, in this case, goods are generally not displayed or sold on site. Again, their subordinate part of sales is noted again, kind of in reverse of the inclination that we're looking to take in terms of a retail kind of front and a manufacturing to the back. Again, as noted here, relatively few customers would come to the manufacturing site. Well, certainly, perhaps customers may not be at the manufacturing area within a use, but the idea would be to have more of that foot traffic and concept of customers coming forward to this type of use. So the examples given as well perhaps maybe a bit too truly industrial in nature, where it notes, production of chemical products, manufacture assembly of kind of generic term of machinery, equipment, vehicles even, and appliances. So just wanted to highlight some of the components within this that, again, for your consideration here in discussion, just that maybe perhaps a bit too permissive from an industrial perspective in a commercial zone. I did emphasize as well in the materials that provided to you the new Cannery District Redevelopment Plan that was adopted by the Redevelopment Authority earlier this year. So again, relatively new, and looking at some specific areas in there where more of that concept of that maker's district would be appropriate. And we'll zoom in here a little bit. You can see what the hatched areas are those that's more of that live work concept where you have an artisan or manufacturer even living above their retail and micro manufacturing space. Specifically the Riverside site, as you see there, kind of the darker red coloring would be that more of a maker's district, more specifically, with the hatched area again being more of a kind of live work concept. More zoomed in here, kind of showing a rendering from a bird's eye view of that maker's district, that kind of reddish building. The previous slide again talks about things such as with the existence of breweries in the area, perhaps planned park expansion of the trail area, ideal location for maker-inspired businesses. And again, that's the concept that staff was intending to move forward with through this perspective. Another option was not specified in the materials, but did want to include in the presentation here, is the fact that there's a kind of a block study of the Block 7. Again, this is at Wisconsin Street, Parcel Street, looking essentially to the southwest towards the RC building you can see behind and Phoenix Parking on that. And again, the idea of creating some live workspaces along Parcel Street there, that smaller scale, artisan or micro manufacturing within a smaller footprint, but again, incorporating that mix of uses with that abundant foot traffic and retail component included. Did want to point out too some other materials that staff has discovered since we were last before you back in March. Actually had some conversations with a group called Recap City, and they emphasized this concept of micro manufacturing or artisan manufacturing, and they really look at primarily reusing existing buildings. That's certainly the intent from the applicant as well, is obviously reusing, in this case, more of a retail building, most certainly. But again, with the Recap City group, they look a lot at old industrial type buildings that, again, could have more of that industrial component built into them, again, be more appropriate for that building type. However, again, reusing those to provide for that smaller scale use of light manufacturing production, again, with that retail component attached, as well as, again, as shown in that Maker's District concept from the Cannery District plan, having that residential component as well. So just wanted to show this is a publication called Made in Place by Smart Growth America. It talks about small-scale manufacturers and different categories they could fall into, in that artisan industry, small production, and also small production scaling. So it made it for the applicant to see, where his business could fall within this. The same goes with this kind of a call out from that publication, where it talks about, sorry, some cut off from our formatting here, but gives an example of kind of the small storefronts for retail and production space. And I don't want to, let's say, just read things off a slide if that's not necessarily what we need do here, but I did not provide this to you in advance, but did want to share this again as a result of our research since March. Some consumer-facing producers, again, that's the concept of having that retail component first. These small workshops where the businesses can sell products and also do production on site. Many of these micro retailers produce high-value items, small equipment, choose to locate within neighborhoods. Again, that's the idea also behind with the Cannery district. These businesses complement other storefront uses, such as retail-only shops and restaurants that have items to the street. The street front, as people can walk by and watch products being made and fill vacant spaces in commercial corridors. Certainly, that's the intent and the goal from the applicant as well, with the requested zoning amendment, is to certainly fill some vacant spaces. How that, again, the scale of that production is perhaps the crux of the question here this evening. Should note here too, there's a caption that goes with this photo here. This is the Art Walk in Washington, D.C., where they lease micro retail spaces and local artisan industries. Again, the idea is that there's the micro retail, pedestrian walkway, access to transit. Again, these smaller scale producers and businesses, again, they can grow into larger scale operations as well. But again, the idea is focusing primarily on the commercial, with the manufacturing being, I would say secondary, but again, hand in hand with the retail. With that too, I did want to mention, I did not include in the slides here, that's maybe the last slide, indeed it is. The National League of Cities also put out a publication called Discovering Your City's Maker Economy, and a lot of definitions. So when I start throwing around a lot of these terms, I apologize, they're kind of new terms that we don't necessarily, again, have identified in the zoning code. And so we want to mention a lot of these different options to consider. Small-scale manufacturing, which could also be called micro-manufacturing, as I mentioned, small batch manufacturing, artisan manufacturing. And they also have maker-micro businesses. So I don't want to get into all of those, and there's a whole 30-some page report on that, but the point behind that is, again, there are a lot of different types of labels, use types, definitions that could be considered. And what you have before you, again, with the goal being a noble one, and certainly one that I think we're all working together towards, to be, again, more permissive in some commercial districts for this kind of small scale or light manufacturing, but to a degree that may be perhaps too permissive, just utilizing our current definition with just a few, redactions, and then just essentially copy and paste it over into the commercial designation. So with that, again, I know the applicant may have some examples as well. There are certainly some other examples around the city. Don't want to be ignoring the fact that there certainly are some other uses and other users around the city that may be similar to what the applicant is proposing. There is Artisan Forge off Mondovi Road, as you're familiar. Again, that is in C3, but with planned development, so there's some differences there. And again, they've been scaling and doing different things over the years. Applicant also mentioned a few others in conversations with him over the last month or so. Again, many of them are more related to some kind of grandfathered in auto uses, auto repair, where there's certain similar machinery may be used, weldings, welders, grinders, lathes, things of that sort. But again, for the most part, there's not much carryover from older uses in the C3 or even C2 in some cases zoning districts. But there are some. So do want to acknowledge the fact that there are a few kind of scattered throughout the city. Again, some of them are older uses that have been there for a while. Some of them even in much older buildings, 50 or 60 years old. So again, some of these have been grandfathered in over the years. With that, again, with staff's recommendations, you want to note that additional provisions for building design, site design, and specific small manufacturing definitions perhaps would be more appropriate for a change to the zoning code. So all those different components, again, inclusive in things like research that we've been looking into over the last few months, as well as, again, additional site planning concepts be included within this would be more appropriate, again, for that change to the zoning code. So with that, staff would recommend that it's more broadly requested version, not advanced, but instead a more targeted amendment be drafted by staff and presented to you for future consideration. Again, we had a discussion that kind of launched back in March. Had a lot of good input at the time, had some feedback from the applicant, and now here we are the first part of November with this proposal before you. And again, we're getting there. This is certainly a step in the right direction, but staff would just recommend a reconsideration with those additional components. I should note too that we're trying to be protective of the Planning Commission in that, as proposed, certainly there would be that additional protection of a conditional use permit process that, for example, the applicant would go through, where the Planning Commission could place certain things such as hours of operation, light restrictions and things of that sort. Again, the protectiveness being of the Planning Commission being rather than it's a case-by-case basis. Then everything is brought forward to the Planning Commission without really any defined standards. And that's where staff is coming from, is that we prefer to come forward with some prescriptive standards so that it's not just the onus isn't fully on the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission alone, to make all those different determinations based on those types of potentially harmful, but hopefully not. But again, potentially harmful, trying to reduce that harm to neighboring properties. So that's the intent. With again, the conditional use permit can provide for that opportunity, but staff again would prefer to move back, take a step back. That is, provide you with some additional building design, site design, and other specific definitions as I've noted, and be a little bit more prescriptive in nature before moving forward. So, with that, certainly happy to answer your questions, but I look forward to your comments and discussion that we come up here.
Great. Thank you. It looks like Commissioner Graham, you have a question.
Yes, I guess I was delighted to see it fall into the permitting process. And when you highlighted the word chemicals in there, it struck me that there are a number of cases where people can make unintentional consequences from fairly simple household chemicals. It would be, I think, important to have this apply to actually specific tenant spaces and not just the building as a whole. Because if you found, say, one tenant who was using fabric dyes and bleaches to make tie-dyed shirts on site, that could end up with chlorine in the septic system, and some adjacent parcel may be doing something with a painted finish that might have an ammonia base. And if you end up with ammonia and chlorine in the same piping, you end up with a terrible poison hazard. So I think we do need to make sure we can define this, at least on a tenant-by-tenant scale basis, so that we can get involved and limit some of the, in the same way we've been having the perimeter show up on the site plans themselves. We would want to make sure that adjacent or contributing neighbors might have also a chance to demonstrate their chemical separation or their particular hazard separations that might need to occur. So I'd like to see this refined, but I think we're on the right track with a system that puts all of it
in a permit-based system like this.
Thank you. If I may respond just briefly, I'm wondering in part if Mr. Granlund read about the city I used to work for, where I dealt with tie-dye operation immediately adjacent to a beauty salon. So thankfully there were no serious consequences, but exactly as Mr. Granlund points out, there could be some unintended consequences, just not knowing one use to the next and their type of operations and the potential hazards that can happen from that. Absolutely. So, thank you.
I had not heard of that, but I would also mention that there are some metallic interactions that occur between, say, aluminum powder and an iron oxide that are pretty dramatic as well. Not poisonous, but extremely pyrotechnical. We would not want those kinds of consequences.
Good to know. Thank you very much.
Right. Any other questions? Commissioner Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Allen, thank you so much for all that background. It's actually very exciting to look at the Arlington development that we've experienced in our area. As we consider these changes, I'm wondering about the applicants and what kind of time frame they are on. What demands do they have for response?
Sure. I mean, for the applicant to answer a question.
Well, let's see if we can get one go.
We need to make Mr. Dye an analyst. That's problem before. We wanted to do that. In response, just briefly, again, we've been working with the applicant very recently, last month.
Mr. Dye, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, that specific question, what was the specific question? Oh, timing, yes. Yeah, I mean, so there are a couple components. One is a relatively short-term component. One of them is a longer term. So we have some activities now. So we had some activities this summer that we had leases expiring on. So we at that point tried to make decisions on which direction to go with some small part of our manufacturing that's in a gray zone between the jobbers manufacturing, very similar to a lot of other things that are done in the C3 area now. When we looked at this originally, we were looking at the Shopco building, which is still an interesting building for us. The decision time frame for that, for example, is sometime between now and the next 3 to 4 months. We have an option on some land in the industrial park, for example, and our options primarily for some component of what we do are restricted to the industrial park because of the zoning. However, it's very light manufacturing, no ammonia, no thermite, and so nothing of that sort of nature. But our option to buy the land in the industrial park expires in March, and so if we can buy an existing building that's not going to be used and use that instead, that will save us the time and effort and cost of building the new one, and then we won't add capacity in an area that already has lots of capacity, lots of excess capacity. So that's the rough timing. Some of the activity can occur relatively rapidly, some of it the next month or two, some of it by March.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Allen or Mr. Dunn?
Thank you.
All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here who came to speak on this item today? Ms. Mosley, you have your hand up. If you come to talk about this item too?
Sorry, no, I still had my hand up from before. I have no comment on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dye, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, the quick overview from my standpoint, there's a lot of excess retail in C3 zones, and with all that's transpired the last year, especially, but even before that, there's a lot of that that's very unlikely to be absorbed as retail. And so rather than rebuild, our thought is that through conditional zoning of this change, the city and the zoning commission, like they've done with the excellent Makers District downtown, can make a judgment call along the way as specific activity comes up and evaluate it. Right now, the way that the process is written and structured, there's no mechanism to even say yes for this sort of stuff. And so moving this over and making it conditional use allows the zoning commission to say yes. And then, these sort of spaces can be rebuilt as, like the Shopko, for example, is not going to be as fancy as the stuff Scott showed. That's very nice stuff, and that would be great downtown. Shopko building, to just keep it from turning into 10 years of Kmart is probably a win. And so being able to do something like the Chippewa Valley Innovation Center, whether it's one company or multiple companies, I think is a reasonable use of that space that acts as a good placeholder until there's something better that comes along to use it. So that's our thought process on the idea of moving this direction. Making the transition now to move this into the C3 allows that to happen at a reasonable time frame. And then prevents us from having to decide. For example, we have an acquisition from River Falls we're looking at. It's basically 3 high-skilled machinists who are looking to move over. But until we know what the path is, we're not going to do that. And this sort of thing gives us a pathway to do that. If it turns out it's not acceptable to the Plan Commission on conditional use, then that's right is still controlled by the Plan Commission to make that decision. So that's part of what we're doing, is just try and, as long as we need space, to try and use something that's there rather than destroy perfectly good lots and leave these buildings to sit and rot. So that's a little more texture on our detail. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. We will see if there's a motion on the commission. Mr. Seymour.
Thank you. I make a motion for approval.
Mr. Christopherson. Thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Volkram.
Thank you, Chairperson Larson. Can I ask Mr. Allen a question?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Allen, what is the possible downside of Mr. Dye's just recent request of conditional use transitioning now and then working out more of the long-term ordinance language later? Thank you.
That's a great question. I did speak with our development manager again today, Aaron White, and try to get a gauge for our other businesses lining up to move into just a vast number of open retail spaces to do this kind of activity. He said no, apart from, as Mr. Dye mentioned too, the former Shopko building. And so that could be something that may be a concern, is the fact that that you may see something more substantive in that larger scale building. With Mr. Dye's operations, as he noted, more generally that there are some commercial tenants and components within the building that he's utilizing now. So you do manufacturing, production, assembly type of thing. But right now he has quite a bit of that space utilized with other retail components. So that would be one red flag, perhaps, as a specific property. I should note as well too, there are other vacant buildings, again, as acknowledged by the applicant as well, that could be utilized for this type of function that may not be very appropriate. And that was kind of the crux of my presentation, was to say that to utilize a former commercial retail building site and area for light manufacturing primarily, because as shown in the proposed language here, it's more of a light manufacturing production centric approach, with retail as, again, very secondary. Again, noting here in the characteristics with this definition, relatively few customers would come to this site, whereas the intent is to kind of turn that around. And especially when you're talking about a commercial building, commercial site, where again, the original use of construction and design was really for that commercial component. Almost entirely, in this case, the idea would be still to have that component and still more primarily so. So again, in Mr. Dye's operations of the former home furniture building that he's utilizing in particular, as you know, he is using it for other tenant spaces for retail. So there's certainly that component there. But again, this would still perhaps open it up for the entirety of the Shopko vacant space utilized for light manufacturing, and again, exclusive of kind of the retail component that we really want to be emphasizing. I think the idea is that co-locating retail with industrial can be problematic, and the idea is just, as Commissioner Brandley mentioned, just from an operational and chemical use standpoint, it should really support. The concept here is to support other retailers with more foot traffic, and by having, for example, the Shopko building exclusively with light manufacturing production, it really kind of creates an island or a barrier to reusing even the strip center that's still there, and even some of the outlets there as well. So the idea is that, shown in the images, admittedly so, those kind of the best case scenario, showing the Washington DC art walk, showing the Makers District, the Cannery District, but the idea is there to create this, I hesitate to use the overused term synergy, but to create that synergy with the mixed use types. And this still would be more exclusive staff fields. And that's why we'd recommend something with additional specificity. But again, if the intent is, I guess, and along with that too, certainly appreciate trying to avoid, kind of wordsmithing here as well. I highlighted some sections only to call them out and then sort of say, well, if we just kind of cut and paste these other parts, it'll be okay. Do want to be respectful of the applicant's preferences and recommendation here and requests, because the more you cut things out of here, the less likely it would even apply to what you think. So I hate to say it's an all or nothing proposition, but certainly as the plan commission wishes, we'll certainly work through that. And as I mentioned too, the Shopko building is kind of the first one. Mr. White, talked with him today, doesn't have a lot of people knocking the door, but who knows what even happens tomorrow that could turn things around and make things different. And all of a sudden, there are vacant restaurants that somebody wanted to do light manufacturing production, as I mentioned as an example, not intended for that use. Again, they can make adjustments and improve things from a building code perspective, but as a use type, is that preferred in that zoning district? That's the question. So without doing a full survey and study of every parcel within C3 zoning to see, the pros and cons of, this one's vacant, this one's not, what's the interaction with the neighborhood, I guess I hesitate to say that it is, without concern, because even just the shop building alone could cause concern.
Okay, Commissioner Granlund.
Yeah, having the mention of the Shopko building come in, I'm almost going to reverse some of my comment from before, because I could see a very, very simple transition for something like the digicopy there to go from paper printing methods that they've got as a storefront activity. By simply purchasing another machine, they could be doing rapid prototyping, 3D printing, also for the public, and that would almost slide them over into manufacturing with one minor change to a machine. We've had things like that almost next door to the restaurant that used to be within that building, and I'm pretty sure that there have over time been nail salons using all sorts of chemistry that shared some of that corridor space within that Shopko building. I do think that language that suggests that the particular light industry be compatible with the retail uses that are already prevalent in these might be sufficient to strengthen this in the direction we want to go. But I do think that the fact that this falls under the conditional use permitting process goes a long way to making this an excellent procedure. I'd be very tempted to actually vote for this the way it is. And otherwise, a very small edit would suggest that rather than excluding the walk-up customers, but would be to emphasize the fact that walk-up customers would be present due to the retail circumstances.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Christopherson, did you have something you wanted to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just having a lot of thoughts about this proposal because it seems like we're so close, but we're really not close enough. I thought in our conversation in March, it seems like there was some comment about the construction and physical safety of the building. And we're not really talking about that. We're talking about reuse, but not necessarily the structure of the building any appropriateness for the new use. The other piece is that I like so much about how the applicant has a property and is trying to just expand appropriately what might fit in there, while we're also trying to look longer distance into making a better template for other decisions. And it just seems like the time frame for making that decision is a little too tight. I like to feel like we all are 90% in favor of the language in front of us instead of just generally in favor of the proposal. So I really like the conversation. I like where we're going to end up. I'm really not sure that I would support what they're going to do tonight. So I'm still on.
Thank you. Mr. Wolfgram, did you have your hand up a little bit ago?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to put my support behind Commissioner Brandlin's suggestion that if that wording inclusive of retail that he was referring to could be added, I would be also in favor of this conditional use option, and then spending more time in the future about the rest of it. But I just want to say that I'm in support of what Commissioner Granlund said. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Christopherson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. What is actually the consequence of the conditional use as a precedent. How do we deal with that in the future?
I'm trying to answer your question, Commissioner Gustafson, but certainly feel free to respond or ask it if I'm not quite on the mark. In terms of use permits, and Mr. Petrie could also correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, they're not time limited. They are something that goes with the land. So, for example, in this case, not suggesting anything in particular other than an example, say Mr. Dyer to sell the property, and then another user could come in and operate under that same use permit. Is that kind of the intent of your question?
But it stays with that property and it doesn't.
Correct. That's the property, and I'm looking at Mr. Petrie to confirm. That's not, thank you. And again, as noted as well, and to respond on comments from earlier, that staff is, has to be protected. The planning commission makes sure that, with the conditional use, that there are enough defined conditions, prescriptive conditions up front, so that it's not all left to the planning commission to come up with a laundry list, for example, of conditions applicable to each site. That's certainly, because the pros and cons of that. Pro being certainly a laundry list of conditions that could be respective of the neighboring businesses and neighboring properties and such. The con being that it's incumbent upon the language to really ensure that all those have been accounted for and then staff to ensure that those are compliant with. So, pros and cons to conditions that I could teach a class on. If needed.
Okay. Any further discussion from the commission? All right. We have a motion and a second. There have been no amendments. So let's take a roll. Mr. Christopherson.
No.
Seymour. Aye. Brett Hall.
Aye.
Bradley.
I'm still torn. I think I'm going to end up no at this time.
Okay. Gregor.
No.
Rosen.
Aye.
Wolf Graham.
No at this time, but I would have liked to have seen the change in language. Thank you.
Obey.
No.
And chair votes no.
It feels 3 to 6.
Thank you. I'm confident this discussion is completed.
Certainly not. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have much to add from that perspective other than to say, as noted several times previously, that and as Chair here, I appreciate the conversation, discussion, that there seems to be a consensus on the end goal. And so just certainly what does that look like and how we get there. And certainly background staff to make sure that we bring something forward quickly.
All right, thank you. Item number 7 is a public discussion for recommendation to City Council for approval of an annexation on the northwest corner of Highway T and County Line Road.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. Before you this evening is a request for annexation identified here again by the agenda number 7. As you noted, the northwest corner or quadrant of County Highway T and County Line Road in Chippewa County in the town of Wheaton. More specifically, here's the essentially 2 40-acre parcels, again, plus or minus 80 acres in size total. The pale yellow is the current, in the red boundary, of course, current city limits and city property in the city of Eau Claire. This is immediately adjacent to the west of County Highway T. The aerial photo that you may recall from back in July of this year. Your meeting in on July 20th of this year came before you as a request to acquire land, vacant farmland in the town of Wheaton here in Chippewa County to annex to City of Eau Claire as well as to the Gateway Industrial Park. And so this is in conjunction with plans and proposals from Chippewa County's new industrial park, and they're looking at a City of Eau Claire combined total of approximately 200 acres with the property, which shows a little better there to the east, can add to this and start looking at that larger scale available property for industrial park expansion. So again, this is before you for that request for recommendation of the council, your July 20th meeting for purchase of the property. Conversing with Mr. Petrie just before the meeting. It is in the middle of closing as we speak. So this is an annexation request that goes in conjunction with that. So again, the property is located within the sewer service area, just to confirm, and the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan for future industrial use as well. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions from the commission? Mr. Allen. Mr. Christopherson.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Allen, what impact does this have on that EDA application? It's just west of that, correct?
Correct. Great question. I did not ask that of Mr. White before we met tonight. I did have a conversation with him about this. He did not indicate any impact or connection with that, but when I did meet with him, actually said he was working on the application as we speak. So yes, there's an EDA application in the works. I want to say it is at least in ancillary form connected, but again, it is in conjunction with Chippewa County and their future industrial park expansion as well. So this is in connection with that.
Any other questions from the commission? I see none. City of Eau Claire is the applicant. This was public discussion. And so we'll see if there's a motion. Mr. Seymour.
Thank you. Motion to approve.
Mr. Christopherson.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Christopherson.
I'd just like to share with my commission that I'm on the board at the Chippewa Valley Innovation Center, and this particular expansion to the Gateway Industrial Park has spurred a lot of excitement and productive cooperation, coordination with Chippewa County, and really is a very exciting opportunity.
Good to hear. Any other discussion? All right, call the roll. Mr. Christopherson.
Aye.
Aye.
Brenholm.
Aye.
Brandon.
Aye.
Gregor.
Aye.
Rosnick.
Aye.
Wolfgram.
Aye.
Obey.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and that item passes. Future agenda items and announcements. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. that anything is going well in year 2020. The fact that even before you started this year, you only have one meeting scheduled for the summer. Well done. December 14th. This is how it works. This is it's only because this is one of 3 meetings you have this month. So again, it's 2020, so nothing is without a split, and that is about 3 meetings. But we are anticipating having our next planned work session before your next meeting on Monday the 16th. And we're going to scheduling a staff meeting to specific materials and updates for you in advance of that. Again, we do have a meeting on Monday, November 30th, which is the Monday after Thanksgiving. So if there are any kind of attendance issues, please let us know as soon as possible. But right now we're scheduled for the one meeting in December, which is the 14th. And with that, I should also note that your second meeting of January is January 18th, and that is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. You have traditionally met on that day. However, technically, City Hall is closed. We do staff training all day, and it has been brought to our attention that as we put together the calendar of meeting dates for 2021 and finalize that, we just want to bring it to your attention, and it does not need to be a decision point tonight, but staff would recommend canceling that meeting. If need be, you can certainly push it, as we've done in other cases, to Tuesdays at 19 if an additional meeting is needed in June. At this point, staff would recommend canceling that. That is really the only meeting that seems to happen that night, and it does end up conflicting with other activities and events related to the home. So we ran into some of that even last year that I know there was kind of issues too, and we need to conflict with ourselves of other events that with the related to the city, especially regarding
Okay. And just to confirm, the work session on the 16th will start at 5:30.
Yes, unless there's interest in starting earlier, again, staff is certainly open to that, but we're hopeful that 1 hour will suffice. And again, as a part of that, we are hoping that we can lay out a clearer path for the subsequent months we're taking. And as we start talking, as I'm talking about canceling me in January, hopefully finalizing reviews in January. So, please come with your questions, comments, and ideas, and we can have a clear map for the 16th for you, so you know specific dates and times that we recommend. And along with that, again, everything's been a challenge here lately with public meetings, but trying to engage in the public through this process as well, beyond just work session, observation, or public comment meeting, opportunity here tonight. So, all of to say, yes, we'll plan at 5:30 unless there's interest from the majority of the planning commission intended to be by your bylaws. It's not a majority, but by at least 3 of you. So if there are 3 of you, other than the chair, I'm sorry, Chair, you were excluded. That counts. This is how it works with the bylaws. If there are at least 3 of you who'd like to start at a different time, really, we're all done. Okay. Be very respectful of me at 4:35 and continuing onward and providing you with any kind of substance to keep you going. At this time, Mr. Petrie is aware of a large number of items, so that your meeting at 7 o'clock would not be very long. Okay. Good. Any other comments from the commission about future agenda items or announcements? All right. Without objection, this meeting is adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.